On the day of my spouse's delivery of the offspring belonging to her chronically sick former partner, my spouse's parents stationed 10 security personnel outside the birthing suite. My spouse's parents stationed 10 security personnel outside the birthing suite. However, even after the birth was completed, I refrained from causing any disturbances. My spouse's mother grasped my spouse's hand and uttered with a sigh, "Lana, do not fret. So long as we are present, we shall prevent him from approaching you." Your father even arranged for individuals to secure the hospital's entry point. If he attempts to interfere with the birth, we shall contact law enforcement. My spouse, appearing pallid and frail, gave a slight nod but instinctively peered towards the lift. What my spouse, appearing pallid and frail, saw was merely an absence, and only then did she exhale in apparent tranquility. She could not fathom it. My sole intention was to assist her in preserving a heritage for her genuine beloved. Why could I not simply comprehend her perspective? Observing the attendant cradling the wailing infant, she beamed with contentment. She mused that if I were to pay her a visit the following day, perhaps she would absolve me of all our prior disagreements. She would even permit me to assume the role of the infant's parent. However, unbeknownst to her, I had recently forwarded my documentation to the global organization. In a week's time, I would relinquish my citizenship, transition into a physician without a nation, and never come back. The day Lana was discharged from the postnatal care facility, I had recently concluded my duties at the medical center. As I neared the entrance, I could perceive the sounds of merriment and elation emanating from within. This infant is remarkably beautiful. This infant is remarkably beautiful. Those large eyes are undoubtedly the father's most captivating attribute. My spouse's mother was jovially engaging with the infant in her embrace. Meanwhile, Jamie emerged from the culinary area carrying a bowl of simmering poultry broth. "I prepared this broth personally. You remain delicate. It is imperative to replenish your vitality." He positioned himself adjacent to Lana on the resting platform, delicately proffering sustenance, fostering an ambiance of familial affection and coziness. My spouse's father was clutching a noisemaker, his laughter so profuse that his mouth remained agape. This infant is truly endearing, reminiscent of the father. Thankfully, it is not that reticent Carl. Otherwise, having a medical practitioner as a parent would be quite troublesome. My grasp on the portal handle tightened. I reminisced about my initial encounter with my spouse's father. He had patted my shoulder, remarking that serving as a medical practitioner was a distinction for the entire kin, preserving lives and mending the injured. He also disclosed that he had once practiced as a physician himself, and if it had not been for an impairment sustained during a medical altercation, he would not have taken early retirement. However, at present he was asserting that medical practitioners were undeserving of familial bonds. I had merely taken a year's sabbatical for advanced education, and this kin had already grown utterly unsupportive of me. I inclined my head, acrimoniously contorting the edges of my lips. I had been wedded to Lana for 3 revolutions of the sun. She had consistently maintained her disinterest in procreation, and I comprehended that childbirth could be perilous. Thus, I never exerted undue pressure. I distinctly recalled the day I departed for my studies in a foreign land. She wept copiously, professing her longing for my presence. We had engaged in daily discourse since then, divulging our experiences. Even our associates jested that, despite being united in matrimony for 3 solar cycles, we still behaved like a youthful, enamored duo. But a month prior, when I finally secured a respite to return to our dwelling, I discovered Lana with a prominently distended abdomen, standing beside her initial beloved. My cogitations were disrupted by Jamie's inquiry. "Carl, when did you arrive? Why are you merely lingering at the doorway?" Upon hearing his voice, the others within the chamber also redirected their focus towards the ingress. When my spouse's father observed the notice of resignation in my grasp, his scowl intensified. "How did I ever permit you to wed my offspring? What a calamity. Presently you are relinquishing your occupation. Are you contemplating subsisting on us elderly individuals? Is this the manner in which a spouse is expected to conduct himself?" My spouse's mother chimed in with a censure. You relinquished your occupation. You could not even retain your advantageous position. And now you are inquiring about your future course of action in the absence of employment. How shall this kin endure? Lana's well-being is precarious, and the infant necessitates financial resources. Are you intending to subject the three of us to privation? I could not help but find this situation droll. Whosoever's spouse and progeny it may be, it is incumbent upon them to provide sustenance. Carl, what utterance was that? Do you possess no notion of accountability? Lana, finally unable to endure it any longer, addressed me with reddened eyes, her voice raised in exasperation, and in her perturbation, she clutched her chest and emitted a series of forceful coughs. Had Jamie not averted my demise in the vehicular collision 3 years prior, I would have perished long ago. His progenitors are both deceased, and he has now received a diagnosis of terminal malignancy. Imminently, he shall fade from memory. Why do you perpetually target him? Do you perceive me as that sullied, contemptible female within your innermost being? Jamie regarded her with a gaze brimming with anguish, offering solace as he redirected his attention towards me. Carl, it would be prudent for you to curtail your discourse. I acknowledge that this entire predicament is attributable to my actions. I pledge to abstain from intruding upon your existence henceforth, but I implore you not to permit my presence to adversely affect your rapport with Lana. All right. I scrutinized the quartet, united in opposition to me, and my amusement only intensified. So this was the semblance of an authentic kin. At that juncture, Lana interjected, her tone frigid and resolute. Carl, my forbearance is finite. Should you ever again direct your animosity towards Jamie, refrain from returning to this abode. If your desire is to remain united in matrimony with me, it would be advisable for you to maintain silence. The following week, at the complete lunar cycle festivity, I shall proclaim in the presence of our kin and companions that you are the progenitor of the offspring. The following week, at the complete lunar cycle festivity, I shall proclaim in the presence of our kin and companions that you are the progenitor of the offspring. The following week, I cast a fleeting glance at the infant, already soundly slumbering within the perambulator. By then, I would be en route to a foreign land. However, prior to my departure, I did not object to bestowing upon them an indelible astonishment. Maintaining an impassive countenance, I assented with a nod. Affirmative. Subsequently, I disregarded their responses, pivoted, and proceeded directly to the sleeping chamber to gather my possessions. Having resolved to depart permanently, I harbored no desire to leave any vestiges behind. The merriment and elation emanating from the communal living space permeated through the portal, and my manual actions momentarily ceased as I arranged my garments. Jamie, I desire to bestow your surname upon this offspring. Thus, even if he addresses another as father in the future, he shall perpetually recollect that you are his authentic progenitor. Although I could not witness it directly, I could readily envision the profound fondness adorning Lana's countenance as she articulated these words. And my own cardiac organ was already lacerated, replete with lesions. I abruptly recollected the day I hastened homeward in the preceding month, still clutching a memento for Lana that I had procured abroad. However, upon reaching the portal, I observed Lana and Jamie, freshly returned from an ambulation, their hands clasped, while Lana's visage was suffused with trepidation. Jamie, regarding me with bewilderment, inquired if I had arrived at the incorrect domicile. I uttered not a syllable. My scrutiny was fixated upon Lana's protuberant, gravid abdomen. I had been absent for 11 lunar cycles, and yet my spouse was with child. Regardless of the intensity of my efforts, I could not delude myself into believing that this progeny could be mine. It was not until Lana hastily interposed herself before Jamie, introducing us. This is my spouse, Carla. I anticipated that Jamie would withdraw upon hearing this, but instead, akin to the male head of the household, he extended an invitation for me to enter and partake in a respite. As we traversed past each other, he murmured, just audibly enough for our exclusive hearing, I was informed that you are considerably senior to me. Hence, I shall address you as elder sibling, considering that the infant within your spouse's womb is mine. My thorax seethed with indignation, and I could no longer restrain myself. I delivered a forceful blow to his facial region. I entirely forfeited my rationality. The yearning from the 11 lunar cycles I had been separated from Lana transmuted into unadulterated fury. Had I possessed a blade in my grasp, I might have indeed slain this pair of canines. The denizens of adjacent dwellings overheard the tumult and summoned the constabulary. We were all conveyed to the precinct, but since it was a familial dispute, the constabulary could not intervene and permitted our return to our abode. As soon as we arrived, my spouse's parents, hastening over after receiving the news, did not pose a single inquiry and immediately commenced berating me. They rebuked me for engendering such a spectacle and causing them humiliation before the neighbors. They upbraided me for squandering all those years of erudition, that I should never have resorted to physical aggression against anyone. If any untoward event transpired, they would never absolve me. It transpired that they had been cognizant of Lana and Jamie all along, and had even endorsed their liaison. In a mere revolution of the sun, Jamie had metamorphosed into the quintessential son-in-law in their estimation. Meanwhile, I had been maintained in a state of ignorance. I experienced nothing but acrimony, my cardiac organ burdened with affliction. Lana falteringly approached me, endeavoring to clasp my hand and endeavored to persuade me. I never intended to perpetrate betrayal against you. Jamie's physical condition is compromised, and the medical practitioner has indicated that he has a mere 6 lunar cycles remaining. I could not bear to witness his demise without a progeny. I contemplated engaging in a discourse with you regarding this matter prior, but you were situated in a foreign land, and I harbored no desire to inconvenience you or impede your scholarly pursuits. Consequently, I resolved to defer until your return to broach the subject. If you are amenable, could we nurture this offspring collectively? Begetting a child was such a momentous resolution, yet it sounded so nonchalant emanating from her. I stowed the final remnants of my garments into the travel case just as my spouse's mother impelled the portal ajar. She espied the travel case at my pedal extremities, adopting an expression of feigned affability. Since your departure, I have permitted Jamie to occupy your sleeping chamber. Presently, the study has been transmuted into an infantile nursery. This evening, you shall have to resign yourself to slumbering in the communal living space. Or alternatively, you could procure lodging at an accommodation establishment. I was genuinely enervated and lacked the vigor to seek out an accommodation establishment. I assented with a nod, preparing to recline upon the sofa for the nocturnal period. However, in the depths of the night, the auditory manifestation of an infantile wail reverberated from the sleeping chamber. I rotated my corporeal form, poised to insert auditory plugs, but then I perceived Lana's remonstrance. You are required to address the infant's needs, or he shall persist in his vocalizations. You are my offspring. Simply attend to it. Allow the juvenile to vocalize a while longer. It aids in pulmonary development. Lana emitted a gentle cachinnation and uttered, "You are so vexing." Subsequently, the auditory manifestations of the bedstead creaking ensued. I enshrouded my cranial region with the bed covering, endeavoring earnestly to disregard those intolerable auditory stimuli. However, as soon as I occluded my ocular perceivers, Lana's visage from when she initially professed her affections to me flickered in my consciousness. She had been so immaculate and exquisite, with her cardiac organ and ocular perceivers solely imbued with my presence. However, that iteration of her no longer pertained to me. I slumbered throughout the nocturnal period in a nebulous state, and by the advent of dawn, I was already embarking with my travel case. I proceeded to the authorities to deregister my domiciliary registration and also manage the requisite procedures for departing the nation. Since I possessed government-sanctioned documentation, everything transpired expeditiously, and the functionaries did not pose an excessive number of inquiries. Just as I was on the verge of departing, the functionary abruptly summoned me back and proffered a piece of fruit-flavored confection. May your aspirations materialize. I bestowed upon her a reassuring grin, and, upon exiting, I located a proximate accommodation establishment. Once I deposited my baggage, I was about to venture out for sustenance when I unexpectedly encountered Lana, Jamie, and their two progeny. Jamie was attired in a bespoke Armani ensemble, appearing resplendent and robust, exhibiting no indication of a man on the cusp of expiration. Carl, I espied you from a distance just now and surmised it was you. Lana was asserting it could not conceivably be you in this locale. His scrutiny descended upon the recruitment handbill in my grasp, and a cognizant smirk disseminated across his countenance. Carl, so you are presently in pursuit of employment, but with your delicate physique, are you not merely subjecting yourself to hardship by transporting construction materials on a building site? I offered no rejoinder. The handbill had been bestowed upon me by a youthful maiden on the thoroughfare just a moment prior. I had observed her disseminating leaflets in the frigid winter, so I casually accepted one from her. When I remained taciturn and merely clutched the handbill in my grasp, Jamie's derision intensified. Had you articulated your quest for employment earlier, perhaps I could have rendered assistance. We are all kin, are we not? If your circumstances are favorable, Lana's prospects shall be safeguarded as well. Then I can repose in tranquility. At this juncture, my muteness was essentially an acquiescence to his pronouncements. Lana, who had previously appeared perplexed, now exhibited a wholly altered mien. She furrowed her brow intensely, and her ocular perceivers brimmed with disdain as she scrutinized me. What is there to introduce? He elected to relinquish a commendable occupation as a medical practitioner. Presently, even if he perishes from starvation in the thoroughfares, he merits no one's commiseration. Carl, you truly possess no notion of accountability. Do you envisage this will compel me to forsake the offspring? I regarded her familiar countenance, but at that instant it felt so estranged to me. I recollected when we initially united in matrimony, when I contemplated resigning and altering my vocation due to internal rivalry at the medical facility. Lana had simply enfolded me in her embrace, delicately patting my dorsal region, and murmured in my auditory perceiver, "We are one. Regardless of the resolution you adopt, I shall endorse you. Relinquishing one's occupation is not a momentous matter. I am confident our prospects shall gleam, and my consort, I shall provide sustenance. Relinquishing one's occupation is not a momentous matter. I am confident our prospects shall gleam, and my consort, I shall perpetually remain by your flank." However, the individual who pledged to perpetually remain by my flank now stood idly by, permitting another male to subject me to humiliation. She appeared to have obliterated the utterances she once directed towards me, obliterated the profound sentiments we once mutually possessed. Even my spouse's parents were oscillating their cranial regions in disillusionment. I must have been visually impaired previously. How could I have entrusted you with the stewardship of my offspring's future felicity? Fortuitously, we remain animate. If we were not present, I cannot fathom the manner in which you would have tormented our offspring in our absence. They persisted in exaggerating their pronouncements, and the bystanders commenced to cast glances in our direction. My appendages, suspended by my flanks, gradually clenched into pugilistic formations. Just as I was on the verge of vocalizing, Jamie abruptly advanced. "We are proceeding to capture a familial portrait. Carl, why do you not accompany us? In the forthcoming epoch, I shall rely upon you to assist in the care of Lana and the progeny." Lana promptly interjected with a disdainful sneer. "Observe his disheveled semblance. If he is included in the photographic representation, it shall merely diminish our kin's prestige." She then rotated her cranial region and proceeded towards the photographic studio, urging Jamie to hasten his pursuit. "Since that is the circumstance, we shall depart initially. Do not permit us to impede you from procuring employment." Jamie bestowed upon me a significant pat on the scapula. Observing his departure, I experienced no emotional agitations within me any longer. To external observers, this was such a harmonious kin. If this was Lana's desire, then what was amiss with me withdrawing and relinquishing? 3 diurnal periods prior to my departure, I received a missive from the administrator. He conveyed that the adept I had requested him to establish contact with on my behalf was within the nation attending a symposium, and he could assist in examining my spouse's father's coronary arterial ailment. My spouse's father had perpetually experienced cardiac afflictions, and several years prior, he was even expedited to the medical facility for emergent intervention. Thus, while I was situated abroad, I had solicited my associates to aid in amassing some pertinent case studies for me. After all, the nexus of years remained extant. Once I rendered assistance with this, I would owe them nothing. However, when my spouse's father apprehended that I aspired to convey him to the medical facility, his countenance promptly darkened. Why proceed to the medical facility? Do you desire for me to expire precipitously? I underwent cardiac bypass surgical intervention, and it was efficacious. What is there to scrutinize? There is a preeminent cardiac adept within the nation presently. You could seek a consultation with him, perhaps undertake some prophylactic measures for the impending epoch. Before I could conclude, my spouse's father hurled his aqueous receptacle at me. You are the sole individual who comprehends how to engage in mellifluous discourse. Do you conceive you can merely summon a preeminent adept as an individual devoid of occupation? All you perpetrate is vaunt. Do you recollect Jamie? He remained awake during the nocturnal hours merely to assist me in procuring an appointment with an adept. Where were you at that juncture? He incessantly juxtaposed me with Jamie, and his demeanor rendered everything perspicuous. Regardless of my endeavors, it was erroneous. No matter my efforts, they would never equate to Jamie's. When this notion traversed my consciousness, I could only emit a bitter smirk. Since you harbor no desire to attend, disregard it. Let it be. It was merely me interposing in matters that did not pertain to me. Presently, it was the day of the infant's complete lunar cycle festivity. I arrived tardily and observed the banqueting chamber replete with kin whose appellations I could not even recall. For a fleeting moment, I experienced a sensation of disorientation. This spectacle was even more grandiose than my own nuptials with Lana, and directly at the ingress to the banqueting chamber, they had affixed a familial portrait of the quintet. As for myself, from inception to culmination, I was merely a jape. When kin and companions perceived my entrance, they promptly commenced to engage in hushed discourse, and even in the absence of auditory perception, I could surmise their utterances. Presently, my maternal aunt seized my brachial appendage and greeted me. "Carl, when did you effectuate your return? Lana made no mention of it whatsoever. I apprehended you had recently returned from pursuing scholarly endeavors abroad and were on the verge of being elevated to the position of chief physician at the medical facility. Your prospects appear exceedingly luminous." I offered no rejoinder, merely inclining my cranial structure slightly in courteous acknowledgement. However, I could distinctly discern the disdain in their ocular perceivers. After all, I was not incorporated within the familial portrait, and the individual who had been accompanying Lana throughout the entirety was not myself either. An individual nearby, seemingly privy to the circumstances, gestured towards the male individual proffering dessert to Lana and inquired, "Carl, who is this gentleman? I was unaware you possessed a younger sibling." I emitted a faint, mirthful expression. "Lana's newly acquired spouse." The maternal aunts, all avid for scandalous information, immediately dilated their ocular perceivers and subsequently congregated, their hushed discourse intensifying. Since Lana's kin exhibited no concern, why should I assist them in concealing the veracity? At that juncture, Lana ascended the dais and procured the microphone. I am immensely gratified that everyone could partake in my progeny's complete lunar cycle festivity. Prior to this, I never envisioned myself assuming the role of a maternal figure. I perpetually harbored the sentiment that I could not successfully embody the maternal role. However, the instant I perceived my infant's vocalizations within the birthing suite, I comprehended the profound potency of maternal affection. Her pronouncements were impassioned, as if she were on the precipice of lacrimation induced by her own sentiments. My maternal aunt, stationed adjacent to me, vociferated, "Let the progenitor of the infant articulate a few words." Where is the progenitor? The ambience within the banqueting chamber congealed momentarily. All ocular perceivers oscillated between Jamie and myself. The response was already self-evident, yet my maternal aunt appeared to be anticipating Lana's personal admission. I encountered Lana's scrutiny and deliberately ambulated onto the dais. With a bewildered expression adorning her countenance, I procured the microphone from her grasp. What is your objective? I issue a caution. Refrain from uttering anything imprudent. Otherwise, our discourse is not concluded. Consternation flickered within her ocular perceivers as she tugged at my sleeve and murmured a caveat. However, I did not even cast a fleeting glance in her direction and extricated my manual appendage. If she had not perpetrated any transgression, why would she exhibit apprehension regarding my potential revelation of the truth? Concurrently, I commenced to articulate calmly into the microphone. Initially, I desire to express my gratitude to everyone for attending today's complete lunar cycle festivity. The kin present here are the ones who witnessed Lana and me entering the hallowed institution of matrimony. Following our nuptials, I invariably cherished your benedictions. However, as you entered earlier, you must have observed the familial portrait stationed at the portal. Upon hearing this, Lana's countenance underwent an immediate transformation. She glowered and hastened towards me, endeavoring to wrest the microphone from my grasp. I adroitly evaded her and intensified my grip on the microphone, continuing. To be candid, I was astounded upon perceiving it as well. But what astounded me even more profoundly was that after sojourning abroad for a solar cycle, I returned to discover my previously childless spouse already 8 lunar cycles into gestation. I am incapable of accepting this, Lana. Let us dissolve our union. I extracted the dissolution of matrimony accord that had been meticulously prepared long ago and hurled it forcefully at Lana's pedal extremities. This was an action I had been yearning to undertake ever since I observed her fostering intimacy with Jamie. Lana's visage assumed an ashen hue. She endeavored to seize the microphone to regain control of the tumultuous atmosphere, but simultaneously, she extended her appendage to seize my brachial member, harboring a desire to elucidate matters to me. Carl, why can you not simply relinquish this matter? Have I not conveyed to you? Provided you abstain from resurrecting it, the triad of us can coexist harmoniously henceforth. The triad. In her rendition of the 3-person kin, I was the unwelcome entity. And candidly, I harbored no further desire to engage in self-deception. Affix your signature. There exists nothing further to discuss between us. I extend my felicitations to both of you. Lana vigorously oscillated her cranial structure. I shall not affix my signature. I do not consent to the dissolution of our union. Carl, do not even contemplate it. When I initially engaged the legal practitioner to draft the dissolution of matrimony accord, the legal practitioner had apprised me that I could petition for Lana to depart with nothing. After all, she had overtly conceived offspring with another male individual during the subsistence of our marital bond. This constituted impeccable substantiation of infidelity. However, amassing substantiation and awaiting a judicial ruling would necessitate an extended duration. I was on the verge of departing the nation, and irrespective of the magnitude of my monetary resources, there was no locale where I could expend them. Consequently, I simply appropriated the portion of the assets that rightfully pertained to me and entrusted the legal practitioner to donate the entirety to the aspirational educational institutions in the mountainous regions subsequent to my departure. There was nothing further to deliberate with Lana. I cast a fleeting glance at the chaotic spectacle and pivoted to depart. However, Lana, unwilling to concede, entrusted the infant to my spouse's father and was on the verge of pursuing me. However, prior to her ability to traverse more than a few paces, Jamie abruptly clutched his thoracic region and gasped for respiration. Lana, I'm experiencing profound discomfort. Perhaps it is attributable to the preceding stress. I believe I am genuinely approaching demise. Jamie, are you in a satisfactory state? Maintain your composure. I shall convey you to the medical facility forthwith. She could only observe as I ambulated away with resolute strides, contemplating that once this entire ordeal was concluded, she would engage in a proper discourse with me. Provided she did not acquiesce to the dissolution of matrimony, our liaison would never genuinely terminate. With that notion, Lana experienced a modicum of solace. The assemblage hastily conveyed Jamie to the medical facility, but en route, Lana's sire appeared to experience an abrupt elevation in cardiac rhythm, due to the emotional strain. Lana nearly succumbed to lacrimation and trepidation, uncertain as to whom to offer solace initially. Just as her sire was on the verge of being wheeled into the surgical theater, they encountered the administrator and the most preeminent cardiac adept in the domain. At that instant, Lana disregarded all else. She hastened forward and genuflected before the administrator. "I implore you, preserve my sire. His condition is genuinely precarious. There was a gentleman named Jamie who previously assisted me in securing a consultation with you. Do you recollect him?" The adept scrutinized Lana for an extended duration before cautiously inquiring. "You are Carl's spouse, are you not? He established contact with me via the administrator earlier, expressing his aspiration that I could assist in examining his father-in-law's condition. I perceived your photographic representation on his telephonic device, and I even lauded him for exhibiting such filial piety. However, I recollect him informing me a couple of diurnal periods ago that it was no longer imperative to conduct the examination. So, what is the present state of affairs?" Upon hearing this, Lana congealed, her ocular perceivers brimming with perplexity and consternation. They had perpetually harbored the conviction that I was incapable of establishing contact with top-tier medical practitioners, presuming that all arrangements were orchestrated by Jamie. However, presently, they comprehended that they had misconstrued me all along. In that fleeting instant, Lana was rendered speechless. The administrator escorted her aside and, with an expression of contrition, articulated, "I extend my profound apologies, Miss Lana. We are on the verge of embarking on an aerial voyage to the United States of America for a colloquium. Consequently, we are unable to partake in the surgical procedure. However, rest assured, our medical collective is the most proficient within the municipality, and we shall exert every possible endeavor to salvage your progenitor." Following the utterance, both of them departed in succession. I subsequently apprehended from the administrator the unfolding of events. Lana genuflected external to the surgical theater, and her maternal figure, suffused with remorse, rebuked her. I consistently maintained, even if Carl was devoid of shame, he would not jest regarding matters of such gravity. You exhibited disbelief. And now observe. If any untoward event befalls your progenitor, you shall bear the onus of responsibility. Her vehement vociferations induced the infant in her brachial appendages to emit a resounding wail. My mother-in-law indignantly deposited the child upon a plastic seating apparatus in proximity. "Cease your vocalizations. You vocalize incessantly throughout the diurnal period." If I were not cognizant of the circumstances, I would surmise I had given birth to a diminutive potentate. However, Lana was no longer heeding. She languidly extracted her telephonic device, desiring to summon me. Perhaps presently I was the sole individual capable of establishing contact with the adept for her sire's surgical procedure. However, her call would not be successfully transmitted. By then, I was already aboard an aircraft bound for a foreign land. I reclined my cranial structure against the fenestration, observing as the external scenery gradually receded until the inertial force propelled the aircraft into the cerulean expanse. I experienced an anomalous sensation of detachment from reality. From this instant forward, I no longer possessed a nationality. I was dedicating myself to the global populace. After a span exceeding 10 hours of aerial traversal, my companion and I were thoroughly fatigued upon our eventual disembarkation. The scene here stood in stark contrast to the tranquil ambiance within China. The locale was rife with conflict and armed entities, and a single erroneous maneuver could result in the forfeiture of one's existence. While we recuperated within the vehicular conveyance, our team leader commenced elucidating the circumstances at our designated destination. Simultaneously, he dispensed a firearm to each of us. He articulated, "Preserving lives is of paramount significance, but of greater import than the mission itself is your own individual well-being." Those utterances resonated profoundly within me. Abruptly, I recollected the years I expended united in matrimony with Lana when I regarded her as my paramount entity. In that epoch, was she not of greater significance to me than my own corporeal existence? Presently, we attained our designated destination. Upon the miry thoroughfare, numerous wounded individuals were seated upon the terrestrial surface. their brachial and pedal appendages enveloped in sanguinary lesions. I apprehended that this vicinity had recently undergone a bombardment. These injured denizens, whose lesions were horrifying to behold, were, in actuality, the ones with the least grave injuries from the cataclysm. The surgical theater was replete. Hence, they had to be positioned upon the roadside. At that juncture, I cast aside all extraneous cogitations and hastened to assist in bandaging their lesions. This was merely the incipience. Over the ensuing several lunar cycles, each diurnal period felt akin to a reshaping of my worldview. However, more crucially, I became more resolute in my determination. I never harbored regret for my arrival here or for my transition into a physician without borders. Subsequently, one afternoon, a colleague arrived in haste, panting, conveying that an individual was seeking my presence. I surmised it was merely another afflicted individual and was on the verge of stepping outside when my colleague appended, "I surmise it is an individual from our native land, a female." My stride faltered minutely, and Lana's countenance instantaneously materialized within my consciousness. Prior to my ability to decline, Lana had already entered. "Carl, it genuinely is you." Her ocular perceivers were reddened as she hastened towards me and enfolded me in an embrace. I could perceive her lacrimal secretions upon my cervical region, and I awkwardly disengaged myself from her. I recollected that immediately prior to my boarding the aircraft, the legal practitioner had transmitted a missive to me. He apprised me that the dissolution of matrimony proceedings had been formally initiated, and irrespective of Lana's concurrence, legally, our marital union would be nullified within a lunar cycle, and we would be divorced. Thus, presently, what was the rationale for her presence here? "Lana, we have already undergone dissolution of matrimony. You are cognizant of this. Subsequent to your departure, a multitude of events transpired. My progenitor, he has departed this earthly realm. I congealed momentarily, completely unprepared. I had not anticipated Lana's sire to have passed away. I extend my sincere condolences. We exhibited disbelief in your pronouncements at that juncture and surmised you were engaging in mendacity. However, the individual who was perpetrating falsehoods was Jamie. He never embarked on a quest to locate any preeminent adepts. My progenitor's ailment was perpetually disregarded. If we had heeded your counsel and sought consultation with an adept, perhaps he would yet remain among the living." With that, Lana crouched, concealing her countenance as she wept uncontrollably. I remained stationary, unmoving, experiencing a constriction within my thoracic region. During my lunar cycle here, I had borne witness to countless separations between vitality and demise. I had surmised that I had already become inured to it all. However, hearing Lana's utterances still stirred something profound within my being. After all, in the incipience, my father-in-law had exhibited benevolence towards me. "I extend my apologies, Carl. I have been in pursuit of you. I aspired to tender my apologies to you in person. I was oblivious at that juncture that your departure was not merely arbitrary, but predicated upon your desire to transmute into a physician without borders. That is the rationale for my undertaking such an extensive peregrination to locate you. I implore you, accompany me in returning. This locale is excessively perilous. I have already forfeited my progenitor. I cannot endure the prospect of forfeiting you as well. I oscillated my cranial structure. Nay, I shall not be returning. As a physician without borders, I no longer pertain to any specific nation. To which locale could I possibly return? Unless the bellicose conflict concludes and no locale remains in need of our assistance, only then could I effectuate a return homeward. Until that juncture, this expansive terrestrial sphere, any locale within it, shall constitute my domicile. I genuinely comprehend my transgression. I should not have engaged in mendacity towards you, should not have been so self-righteous and conceived offspring. Presently, I have recompensed the price. Jamie is in a compromised state. The medical practitioner indicated he might not endure much longer. Carl, how am I supposed to subsist with the progeny? You pledged to safeguard me for the entirety of my existence. I forcefully extricated my manual appendages from her grasp. We are divorced presently, Lana. The manner in which you conduct your existence henceforth is your personal affair. I have matters requiring my attention. It is perilous here. You should effectuate a return homeward. Following the articulation, I pivoted to ambulate towards the encampment. If you do not return, then neither shall I. I shall remain here with you. Whenever your mission is concluded, we can return in unison. I harbored no desire to respond to her utterances, but just as I had traversed a few paces, I perceived Lana retrieve her telephonic device. It appeared to be a communication from a medical facility back home. What? Jamie has expired. I am returning forthwith. You all must await my arrival. At that instant, 2 aerial bombardment vehicles suddenly soared overhead. Hearing the familiar sonority of the propulsion systems, I instinctively propelled Lana to the terrestrial surface. Lana emitted a shriek. "Carl, are you bereft of your senses?" Her vocalization was promptly submerged by the detonation in proximity. The terrestrial surface seemed to quake with the concussive force, and particulate matter from the explosive devices descended upon us. I disregarded her vociferations and gradually elevated my cranial structure, swiftly assessing the circumambient environment. Subsequently, I scrambled to my pedal extremities. Lana, manifestly petrified by the abrupt assault, remained immobilized upon the terrestrial surface. I cast a fleeting glance at her and extended my assistance in her ascension. We are required to procure refuge within. I had long since acclimated to the life-imperiling bombardments that were a quotidian occurrence here. But for her, this was all novel. Her labial structures quivered. Am I destined to perish here? I compressed my labial structures, maintaining silence for a while before responding. I shall arrange for the team leader to dispatch someone to convey you back subsequently. Refrain from returning to this locale. Lana's countenance was obscured by particulate matter as she clutched her telephonic device, remaining taciturn. Presently, the team leader had orchestrated for a local denizen to retrieve her. He was operating an antiquated pickup conveyance and gestured for Lana to hasten her ingress. Prior to her departure, I surreptitiously inserted a couple of monetary notes into the operator's phone and imparted a reminder to ensure her secure arrival at the aerodrome. Even though our liaison had reached its denouement, I could not simply stand idly by and observe someone perish without rendering any succor. Lana uttered not a syllable, seemingly still in a state of shock from the preceding assault. When I pivoted once more, I only perceived her expeditiously entering the vehicular conveyance. I emitted a faint, mirthful expression, almost as though I had anticipated her response. Back at the encampment, a colleague ambulated over to engage in gossip. "Is that comely female your paramour? She traversed such an extensive distance to locate you. It appears to be genuine affection." "Huh. Not akin to my paramour, who severed our connection as soon as she apprehended I was embarking abroad for humanitarian endeavors and procured some youthful paramour in lieu thereof. But hey, how is it that your paramour did not return with you?" I silently stowed my repast container and casually retorted. "She is not my paramour. She is my former spouse." My colleague congealed momentarily, then refrained from posing any further inquiries. Quickly, I banished the matter from my thoughts. 2 years hence, I was presented with the unforeseen chance to return to my homeland, stemming from an unanticipated opportunity. My comprehension of medical science had undergone a profound deepening by this time, and on this occasion, my female companion was accompanying me on my return journey. Our paths had intersected at the encampment. She had deliberately marred her appearance to safeguard me, and I had vowed to provide for her welfare for the remainder of my existence. Over the passage of time, I had come to acknowledge my affections for her. Perhaps it was destiny, observing my solitary state, that had introduced this prospect into my existence. This time, I would ensure that I did not relinquish this cherished connection. Upon my arrival in the country, the erstwhile director of the Central Infirmary personally journeyed to the airport to extend his greetings. He regarded me with a contented smile. "You have acquired a slightly darker complexion and appear somewhat leaner. These past 2 years must have imposed considerable hardship upon you. His commonplace words caused my heart to momentarily skip a beat. I suppressed my tears and extended my arms to embrace him. Just as I initiated a few paces, I discerned Lana at a distance, clutching a young boy's hand. She must have ascertained my arrival through some conduit. As she had come to the airport to see me, in merely 2 brief years, she had undergone significant transformation. She no longer exuded the radiant and exquisite aura of the past. Instead, her appearance bore a considerably greater degree of weariness. She did not approach. I simply remained stationary, devoid of expression, observing her. My female companion, sensing something, grasped my hand and interlaced our fingers. "Is that your former spouse? Shall we proceed to extend our salutations? It appears she has much she wishes to convey to you." I retracted my gaze and gently shook my head. There is nothing to be said. From the instant I exited the banquet commemorating the full moon celebration, our trajectories had diverged. There remained nothing further to articulate between us. I turned my head and entered the vehicle. Shortly after our departure, I received a textual message from Lana. Over the preceding 2 years, she had dispatched several messages to me, but as I had not been utilizing a domestic telephone number, I had not received any of them. The message that had arrived just a minute prior contained only 3 words. "I regret this." I stared at the display for an extended duration, then promptly expunged and blocked her contact. I discarded the fractured telephone card out the window, just as I cast aside all the antecedent errors and misplaced sentiments.